our local piano master, player and piano builder and repairer, tuner, and I guess he knows the history of music and everything else to go with it, so this is going to be great. I don't know, Vern, how long you've been working on this museum here, but he can explain everything to you. I don't think we're necessarily going to go through chronological order on pianos here, but mostly by starting with some of the most interesting ones and working through to the other rooms. So I'll let Vern carry on with this, but I'm sure if anybody has any questions as he's talking, don't be afraid of the camera or anything, because we're just recording this for our own history later on. I'm sure 100 years from now this will be very historic. So, without further ado, we'll carry on.
Thanks again for coming over here. I don't know where to begin really, but let's just start with a piano like this here. For example, this is called the Zapsta's Son Means Nothing to You. It means to me way back about, I would say about 1870, this piano. But this comes from Vienna. And that's where of course, the piano building was a very important at that time, because of Mozart, Beethoven, and all the big names come from Vienna. The music center of the world at that time. And so the style of building at that time was pretty well gauged by the Viennese piano. Today we don't even want to look at it. Generally I would not sell you one. You would say, why not? They're just built differently. They're different in construction, their action, they don't feel the same as our pianos today. The whole thing is a different type of piano. So they were great at that time, and they sounded very good. Unfortunately, this one is not in tune. I can't give you a demonstration what it does sound like, but they do have certain characteristics that the composers at that time liked. Beethoven and Mozart, Brahms, they really liked these pianos. They had a certain sound and characteristic feel. So when we think about, boy, would have they liked to have a Steinway today? Maybe they would have, maybe not. More likely they would have liked to have their latest piano. But at that time, that's what the music sounded like. And we'll demonstrate to you, like in the other room, what the piano sounded like, what they heard, rather than what we think they heard. Quite different. And so the music, when it's played, when you play this Mozart piece or Beethoven piece, don't think they heard what we hear on the piano like this. Not at all. In fact, that's why a lot of the late left-hand runs were different sounding to them than what we get on our pianos today. We wonder why does it play like that? We just don't think about it. Well, that's the way he wrote it, he's the composer. But it sounded different to him. Okay, so there's a lot to go through. For example, here's an interesting piano right here. Come on, stand back and let me take a picture of it. This piano I got, and the reason why I tore it all apart, put it all together, it doesn't sound like anything right now. It's really out of tune. But this came from Leipzig. Went to Cairo. Leipzig is in Germany. Went to Cairo, Egypt. Then he went to South America, in Argentina somewhere. Came to the United States. Landed in Victoria, Vancouver, Trail. Now that gives you an idea of the history of those old pianos. I just found that out when I got the piano. So it went all around the world, and it ended up here in the Nakusp of all places.
It didn't crack?
All the sound was cracked all over the place. So I tore it all apart, fixed it, just to see what it sounded like. Too bad, I don't know. Did you know? I just pulled it up once because the things were all on, so it's really. So to give you an idea, I wanted to hear what it sounded like, just for curiosity. But that's an old German piano.
How would you trace the history of something like that?
Well, the guy told me, there was one owner before him, and he was a fisher on the fisherman down at the ocean, and he knew some people. They told him about this piano, but he didn't travel. He was traveling. Apparently, the piano came along with him all the years. And finally, he ended up getting the piano, moved the trail, and ended up treating him another one for it. And there it is. Key roll shot, I put this piece on, now I have to finish it. So that gives you a little quick idea of a piano traveling in history. Something I know about. It's not the greatest piano, but it'll be all right. All right, and all the other pianos here are just pianos that are for sale or fixing up for, customers. Here's an unusual nice piano. The Burl Walnut, English, and it's not English, it's German. And it's got the original Irish keys, notice the handles on the side. A lot of the old pianos had that. Handles on the side, of course, the candelabra, because we didn't have any hydro. That's why this grandeur has these slides here. Because they have no hydro, and they basically put the candelabra to read their music. So that's why these European pianos have that. So I think here we didn't have to worry about hydro. What, until about turn of the century, eh? Later than that? Because most of the pianos here don't have room for candelabras. But these did. That's a German piano there. And it has candelabras. That has candelabras. So everybody takes them off because they don't want that old looking thing. It's nice to get the original on one part. Is that a birdcage thing? No. Okay, now I'll tell you about birdcage. Maybe that's the thing too. Their birdcages are in the other room. I'll show you, explain that to you. Because that's quite a good thing. That's a normal piano. See, the Germans made two kinds, birdcages and normal. The English, they just love their birdcages. So they just about made everything birdcage. And the Europeans made both. And we'll tell you the pros and cons of it.
Is that the stool that went with that piano?
No, I was one of many tools, I got a bunch all over the place. Picked up. So, I think that's finished this room. Gloria Sarin will play here. Gloria Sarin, piano. She lives in Calgary, that's hers here. And I'm going to do some work to get it up to snuff. She had it in Toronto for about 6 years, nobody did anything, so here I got it.
Is it nice one?
Well, I don't know the answers of it. Strong teeth.
What's the name?
A Glutner. A very high quality piano. In fact, it's number 3 or 4 in the world. Yeah, Glutner, new put in the store piano.
Well, how many
They're into anywhere from
How
40
many piano
to
companies were there in Germany?
all kinds. In fact, I took all my books. Hey, Clark, I put the books all together. They're upstairs. So, and my piano atlas. Okay? You want to there's about 5,000 piano companies in the world at one time. And it's the stock crash that really destroyed many piano companies around it. It's the stock crash. But 5,000 or more, even more than that. They keep coming across names, I'm not in the book, even right here in the house. Not even in the book. Like I had my boy Clark and I want to build piano, we start building pianos. But now the cost would be too heavy to do. But those days, each one became their own manufacturer. In fact, the piano company worldwide was the largest industry in the world until the automobile company. It actually put America on its feet. Oh yeah, they made as many pianos before as the Japanese in the world is making now. It was a huge industry. They were exporting out of the United States hundreds of thousands of pianos to Europe and all around the world. And many of the great, imagine all the metals. Many steel factories survived to make these plates. The metals.
The elephant. Imagine the elephant dead.
That's true. That's all the Irish keys. In fact, Irish keys cannot be bought anymore. Japanese pianos have them only on their expensive pianos, and some of the European pianos have Irish on their expensive top model pianos. I don't know where they get them, but they do sneak them around. Someone gets them. But legally in Canada, we can't have Irish. Oh. A little, yeah. I do have to play. All right, it's not too bad. I can't see the lights on, but I hung it up this week just to see what it looks like. The used thing for it. Last fall, I went to an auction, Manor auction. Usually try to see what they've got. And then I just happened to hear it right. This was in a big box. So I asked, is this coming up for auction? Yeah. The next day, they're going to have it in the auction. So I said, where did the lamp come from? Beige orange. Beige orange. They took it down and they took something else up. I said, oh, it's good. So what do you think I can get it for? Oh, real? So I went down the auction and it's a sad story and a happy story at the end. It's sincere, right? But I was bidding for it. And I made up my mind a certain figure, and I finally got to $100. $100, and I going once, going twice, that I had it. Well, it didn't work out that way. And then about a few bucks after that, then all of a sudden someone jumped in. And then we went up by 10. And I stopped at 200. I said, this is going to be ridiculous. Somebody was bidding against me. I was looking for who it was, because I knew some of the guys already. So finally, I just stopped at 200. I said, okay, he buys it for whatever 210, and I'll go and deal with him. Well, he bought it for 210, and then I went and talked to him after. And took me about 2 hours after the auction was pretty well going. We were still buying things, and finally he sold it to me very reluctantly at double the price. Yeah, sold it. And the next thing he said, I said, "What did you want this for?" He said, "Scrap it." he thought, "Well, he said, I'm not gonna let you have it for $100 if I can scrap it for $500." So that's what he was looking for, scrap metal. He's been there for business, basically business. Everything was a dollars and cents figure. I was just says, wow. And he was also an East Indian person. I said to him, you really love brass. I said, everything I've seen in your culture is brass. And I said, why would you destroy a beautiful brass thing? He said, well, it's money. I'm here for money. So he found himself, and well, anyway, I paid him almost double. He came down a little bit, but not much. Still a good price. Oh, I'm not. I mean, but the thing is, you should have asked for 100, ended up paying more. So how much do you want to get? No, still a good price. Yeah, I'm not complaining. And it's just a prop anyway. When I wire it up, we can see what it looks like.
Well, actually, that's much more effective than what the rest is.
Yeah, I think I got one on him for you. Yeah.
Well, after that, where you better wire it out.
Oh. No, I think it's got a little character and it gives it a little bit of here. Yeah. Especially when I put the lights in. Well, actually this summer, maybe, I hope I can get a little concert up here. Thomas Rao, which is a pianist who bought a piano from me some years ago, he's giving a master class in Denver, and the Silverton group have him up there. And people from Japan are coming, and also whoever wants to be on master classes and audit programs. And his wife teaches singing, and he does piano. And he's quite a good friend of mine. Maybe I would like to get him to have a little concert up here. But that's maybe in the summer. It worked out this year. And he has a Broadwood Grand that's very similar to the one I got in there, that he performed on last year in September. He went to the concert up in Edmonton. And he played all Schubert music on the piano. And I've asked after what they liked about it over the Steinway. He has Steinway and Bergendorfer in his home, all expensive piano. They preferred the Broadwood, even as old as it was, in 1860, because they could sing with it, not against it. It was more of an accompaniment instrument rather than fighting position as a powerful instrument. Like you could not sing with the tickling. To get a room, I wish it was bigger, but let's start this size. And then I've also got other pianos that are not here yet. And there's two of them go here. There's a couple of unusual pianos that's quite different when you see them than anything I've got here. And when you get back into piano history, you come across certain names. Just like in guitars and anything you go, there's always certain key names that get the piano going to another direction. And strangely enough, as much as we want to knock English pianos, they're the ones that actually developed the pianos where we find it today. They really are. They were very great technicians. Many of the English pianos were developed by also German technicians who came over, and the French. So between Germany, France, and England, they actually brought the piano to what we have. And then the Americans took over in a big production scale. Now, names in the past, I mentioned already the Broadwood. There's the Broadwood there. That piano is about 1862. Well, very close to it. And it's an 8.5-foot piano. It's the largest they made at that time. That was their concert grand. Obviously, anybody who's important in concert grand is the only wealthy people at that time. So that piano must have cost, I have no idea at that time the value of pianos. Because usually, when the grand pianos were sold, only the rich people could afford them, and the manufacturer would charge according to what he thinks the person could pay. Okay, so you don't charge. Well, all these pianos are one price, and you go. And it's not that sort of thing. They were built almost on individual payment level. You know, you want a good piano. What do you want on it? Oh, I want this and that. Fine, that'll cost you so much. Built by custom. But they did have a standard piano. Chassis and so on, but from then on it has varied the price. All right, that is a Broadwood, and John Broadwood started way back in 1760, 1770, and he was a very, very fine man, and his whole family for years. He still makes Broadwoods today. Still my favorite company manager. And they came up with some tremendous innovations that we have to owe to them. And that's why I've also brought right behind you. It's a beautiful Broadwood upright. That's one of my little treasures. It's in perfect shape. It's an 1870, and it's a birdcage action. And now I'm talking about birdcage. Everybody wants to know what a birdcage is. What's the difference? Well, let's take the piano apart and look at it. You look at it, it looks like a birdcage. Right? The wire's all in front of it, up and down. All right, now all these pianos here, all these four are birdcages. Because they're so old, that's basically what was the design at that time. And the reason why I call birdcages the wires, but the reason why the wires are there is that these here are the dampers that dampen the sound. And that stops it, see? And they're called overhead dampers. See, another name. There's nothing wrong with overhead dampers, because the grands work with overhead dampers. I mean, it's basically the design of the piano. So there's nothing wrong with it, but generally, any birdcage that comes here from Europe, or these pianos, these old, first of all, they're very dry, and they're hard to tune. A lot of things, they come over here and they change drastically. And usually what they send over here is pretty well the roughest pianos they've got. So if you went out and bought one for $200 and here, I got a good deal on piano. You haven't got a good deal. You just thrown on $200. I've seen people throw $500, $1,000, $1,500 on a piano, like they think they really got something. And unfortunately, sometimes just by sheer luck, they might have got not too bad of a piano. Usually, they're just what they are, museum items. Nice to look at, tune it up a little bit, play it. They're not a piano. For the same amount of money, or a little bit more money, get a piano. A more up-to-date piano. Maybe the last, I would say from 1890s on, you can get a fairly good American piano. These big clunkers, the big ones, great. You can fix them up and they're always good. But their actions are different. These dampers then are behind the hammers, underneath the hammers. Better setup, a better feel. A little easier to work on, and you get all the parts you can order from any piano house in the world for the piano. These here, you almost have to manufacture, or I keep other birdcage axes to fix them up. If someone has one they want to keep, if it's great aunt has, that's fine, then we'll fix it up. That's the only thing I would say, keep them for your sentimentality, but not as a piano. But I keep them because I like the name. Collars, this is another birdcage. Everybody heard of the name Clementi? Now, in classical music, he played Mozart, Clementi, Beethoven, they're all in the same period. Clementi did very well on his touring. He made a lot of money. So he said, what am I doing with my money? So he said, I'll have a piano company. I mean, after all, I'm a piano, so. And so he started the Clementi Piano Company in England. He settled down there, being an Italian. So he did. And he went to England and he started off in opposition to Broadway. Right down the same street. Would you believe it? And he did very well. And then finally he got out of the piano business, sold to college, with Clementi and College. And then College and his family got into it all totally. So from then on became College and College. And so I have a College and College Grand I bought. It's not here yet. I love this Grand. Same wood as that, very tight and very lovely shape. And about the same, this is about an 1880 piano. So it's fairly new. In my sense, and that's in very good shape, you can see, for that age still. And that's a fairly good birdcage. And some birdcages are beautiful. I've had a German birdcage, just held in tune, played well. There's really nothing wrong with it if you get a good one in good shape. And that's rare. Another one, Brinsmead. Also opposition. Now these are three English companies that did tremendous strides in pianos. Brinsmead and its birdcage. Actually, this is even before birdcage. It's even a little different than a birdcage there. And that's why I kept it, because, here we are. You see, look at the difference of what's in there now. That's a different structure entirely, very simple. Jack, whoops, the jack is way down here, that trips the hammer, whereas the jack on there is underneath to trip the hammer. So it's quite a different system. And see, the dampers are overhead, but in between the hammers, from over here, the damper wires are on the side of the hammer. Kind of different. That's even older than that, quite a bit older, about 1850, that piano. And that's how they built them. And the upright was invented about 1820, 1830. So I'm not far from the original. In fact, Back they weren't much different than that. I can show you the diagrams are almost identical. That's as close to the original design made by Southwell. Okay, here's one. Really a tiny one. This is a different type of action entirely. We call it the Milinew Axis, which means nothing to you, but it's kind of a combination of all of them. It's still stuck with the overhead dampers, mind you. It's the idea when the damper got underneath the hammers, it actually changed the smell. But it was very close. Everything in these piano actions developed, everything else was right. But then you just had to make that one switch, make the dampers underneath the hammer. And it would also stamp them better. Because these pianos tend to ring a little bit. You notice that? And that's what Bob said, oh, this piano rings. It doesn't dampen as well. But that's what they liked. That's how they heard the music. They wanted the music to ring on, not quite dancing did. The Viennese were opposite. They wanted their music stopped. When they do stop, the music stopped. The French and the English wanted that over-ring sound. They wanted that type of harpsichord effect. So when you play it for a while, you say, hey, yeah, that's right. And they didn't want the dampers to stop. So that's why they stuck with this design so strongly. That's why the English stuck with the bird case. The Europeans made the switch, put the damper behind it, and made it stop like the Viennese. So you have two schools, two diametrically opposed schools of music. And they finally met. And where we are today. So the Viennese and the English, totally opposite feel. And it's quite a difference. And that's why when you play the music, you've got to think, what was the musician hearing? What was he playing that he wants this music sound like? All right, this here, of course, everybody knows the name Steinway. 1860. Steinway came here in 1850. He built his first square grand 1854. So I'm right just about in the very thing. The area Steinway is not much different than this one. This is the original condition. Nothing's being done to it. I'm just going to set up the damper so you can hear it. And the keyboard is ivory, perfect shape ivory. See, Matt? 1860, perfect shape. I have got the... See that? The dampers aren't holding, of course. I haven't got them. It's not bad.
What's the one in the museum we got? What age is that?
That's about, I would say about 1880, 1890. Now I have a Heinzman in the log house over there, and I have two others on the other side I have to rebuild someday. I didn't want to bring it. This is a good representation of a square grand. In fact, now I'll tell you something about square grand. They thought the square grand was going to be the piano. Never mind the upright. They were just going around the upright. They thought this was going to be the piano. It's going to replace that piano, that one. This is going to be it. Because now you've got everything right. Music coming towards you. It's still against the wall. Doesn't take much room as that. So you've had two good worlds, and it's all there. So I'll tell you, tuning it in the tuner is something else. Well, usually we charge more doing a square grand. It's just backwards. I'm not kidding. It's the worst thing to work on the square grand. A lot of tuners will not touch it, so they just don't like the payment. But the square grand died, natural death, because it never felt as good as a grand piano. Because we got into, then you get into grand action. Here's a grand action. And this is what we see today in all pianos. So it looks complicated to you, but you see there's a hammer, there's a lever here, and there's a jack here. This lever was invented by a man named Erard. Now I'm trying to get an Erard grandeur one of these days, but he did that in 1821. No one listened to it. He was a Frenchman. What do they know about piano? So the Germans and the English just went on their own merry way, and they built their pianos for years in their own way. This system, finally a German took this system and modified it to what this is today. So it's called now Erard Herberger action, because he modified and simplified it a little bit, because the Frenchman was a little unstable. But he saw the wisdom to it. Because what that is, we call it a repetition lever. It lets the hammer float at a high rate speed. You can accelerate and play. You can never beat the hammer. You can never beat the action. It's so efficient that you can't improve on it anymore. That's it. When that came on, then finally they were saying, hey, have you played the new Erard action? Have you played that piano there? And all of a sudden this action became popular, more popular. They couldn't break it. The story was Franz Liszt played a piano like that, or like that,
he would have to have 3 or 4 on the wings because he would bust one piece. So then you have to ship the other one out to be ready to play. So he would have at least 3, 4 pianos for the concert because he weren't stable enough for the power and dynamics of a concert pianist. That's the problem. Even today they're busting actions and hammers some of these violin players. But this is much more stable, and that proves it. They cannot beat this. They can beat that action. That can play everything Mozart ever wrote or Beethoven played, because that's even better piano than Beethoven and Mozart ever had. And this one here is an 1840 Bösendorfer that had the reverse action, the Viennese action again, like I told you outside, but it's not as stable to touch in the long run. We really want to be finicky. Because our music changed in the 1880s, 90s. You got the Impressionist music, very light, colorful music. Then you get into the modern music, very percussive sounds. These pianos could not handle it. They can handle Mozart, but they can't handle our current development of music in the turn of the century. This did it. And so that's why we call this a repetition lever system, quite superior. These do not have repetition levers, neither does that one. That's a direct blow action like an upright, but just going underneath. So that's the difference of pianos and why they have evolved to such a stable extent and why you're paying a lot of money. There's, 18,000 parts in a piano? 18,000 is one record. Some say more than that, but 18,000 parts. A lot of work, a lot of little pieces put together and glued. Look at this. This piece alone has wood, felt, another felt. Then you have the string, the wire. Then you have lead weights. You got pins, and each pin is with bushings. Notice that? Felt bushings around the pin so it doesn't rust. Every little thing has to be done somewhere, either by machine or by hand. They used to do that by hand years ago. Now they have machines doing it. Every part had to be done. And then, of course, from that, they had parts factory. Oh, I'll make you that part. No, I'll make you keys. I'll make you frames. I'll make you this. So that's when you get everybody else together. Steinway Company made everything. So they had Italians doing this, they had the Germans doing that. They had like a whole city in New York making pianos, and a lot of piano companies over in Europe too. They had different things made, like a city, and that was their responsibility. All they did is make keys all day, and then they had maybe a whole factory just making keys. And so that's how it was done. It was like a cart. It was the largest industry in the world. It got people on the ground. It got people from being poor to rich overnight. Many of them made millions and became very wealthy. And like Broadway, they shared their wealth. They made piano houses where you can go and listen to their pianos being performed by top artists in the world. And they come, they invited them, the public come and come in free. And they did a lot of promotions that way, where the pianos, because they want to promote their own pianos, of course, being the best. So,
which of your pianos has that action in it?
pardon?
Which of your pianos has that mechanism in it? That type of mechanism?
The Chickering?
Yes.
The Chickering Grand, the big one I played.
Oh.
Okay. That's the grand piano.
Okay.
Okay, usually the grand pianos. The there's this other Blutner. I showed you the lady that owns that from Calgary. That has a Blutner action. That again is a different ballgame. In fact, Blutner is one of the last companies that would not change because theirs worked so well. But people wouldn't buy the Blutner because it didn't have this action. So they finally had to switch to. It was it. That was it. It was just the do or die. So that's what happened. It became so standard. It's like the piano industry is fairly standard the last 100 years. We can almost interchange parts a lot of pianos. Yeah. Only thing that's so individualistic in the piano is the keyboard. No two keyboards are alike, and yet they're all the same size when they're there. Strange. You cannot change them, but they're not alike of any company. But the Japanese are so good now. You can take an Oriental Japanese piano from Korea. You could take one from Japan. You can mix them, and you won't know the difference. That's how so perfectly they now standardize everything in the piano company, which is good in a way. Any questions now? This Bösendorfer is late 40s. The company started in 1827. So I'm getting very close to their starting time with some of these pianos. I have another piano to bringing is also Chickering. I'm kind of a favorite to Chickering and Broadwood, as you can see. I had a few other Chickerings here, they're gone now. It's called a cock hat grand. You know, when a hat turns that sideways? Well, the grand doesn't go like this. It goes out, but it goes that way, 45 degrees another direction. Built for Victorian homes. And so that, I have that one. That's supposed to sit right over there. It's not here yet, of course. Very unusual. But that's about an 1860s, 1850s piano too. Right at that point. Also, interesting looking piano too.
Can you demonstrate a little bit of period?
Okay, this one here gives you an idea. No, Beethoven type, right? Pardon? Beethoven type. All right, now Beethoven, Beethoven, before he got too deaf, he always wanted the English grand, because it was quite noteworthy that the English were building good pianos. A lot of word came back because the center of music was between Vienna and Paris and England and London. And you've heard about Broadwood, you know, the great name Broadwood. And so Broadwood Company donated and gave him one in 1817. And it was his treasure. And they built the piano specifically for him with 4 strings on each one so he could hear the piano. So that was quite an invention too. Because each note has 3 strings, and the bass 2, and then finally to 1. But they made one for him with 4 strings. And so he was very proud of his grand piano. And so that's what he had, the Broadwood. That was his. Other composers, for example, Mozart, he had a piano called the Walter piano that is built very similar to this design. Actually, I saw the Walter piano in Camrose, would you believe it? A fellow who's also very early music. He's actually earlier than I am. He goes from the harpsichord, clavichord, into the early pianofortes. They just call them pianoforte at that time. And it's very similar to this design. Viennese, called the Walter piano, and it's an exact duplication of Mozart's piano. It's built in, I think it was built in the United States for him. Very interesting piano. And when I heard it, I played it. It's a very shallow key dip. They're very light to play. You can see now why Mozart did what he did and what it sounded like. It's interesting. So you can hear it even here. I just played Mozart to you there. You can hear it's quite different, isn't it? And yet this piano is still, Mozart died in 1797. This piano was built in 1860. Way back. Look, and you're still the difference. So we're right about the middle between there, eh?
Type of bass that he used so much at that time, is that something to do with the types of pianos too? Like they didn't use the running bass like we developed later on.
No, you know, with Beethoven, he did a lot of repetitious bass down there, eh? Because the pianos at that time, well, these pianos don't repeat as well. The older pianos, this repeats not too badly. The older pianos didn't repeat so well, so therefore they did a lot of